The stranger rode into Redding, California on the first day of November 1877, and within an hour, every woman in town knew that the most handsome man they had ever seen had just taken a job at the Watson Ranch. And within 2 hours, they also knew he would not speak a single word to any of them. Hannah Watson noticed him first from the kitchen window of the main house, watching as her father shook hands with the tall man whose dark hair fell just past his collar, and whose eyes seemed to hold entire conversations without his mouth ever opening. She was 22 years old and had seen plenty of ranch hands come and go, but something about the way this one carried himself made her set down her mixing bowl and pay attention. Her father came into the kitchen an hour later, smelling of horses and leather. Hired a new hand today. Name's Nathaniel Cross. Best rider I have seen in 30 years, Hannah. Broke that wild Mustang we caught last week in under an hour, and the horse seemed grateful for it. He does not talk much, does he? Hannah said, returning to her biscuit dough. Has not said a word since he told me his name and that he was looking for winter work. Showed me references from 3 ranches in Montana, all excellent. I do not care if he recites poetry as long as he can work, and that man can work. Hannah nodded, though she found herself glancing out the window more than usual for the rest of that day. Nathaniel Cross moved through the ranch with a quiet efficiency that seemed almost unnatural. He fixed a fence post that had been leaning for weeks, organized the tack room that had descended into chaos, and helped the other hands bring in the cattle from the far pasture without saying a single word. The other men tried to engage him in conversation, but he would only nod or shake his head, offering the occasional gesture to communicate what was necessary. By the end of the first week, the ranch hands had given up trying to make Nathaniel talk. Strangest thing I ever saw, old Pete Martinez said to Hannah when she brought lunch out to the bunkhouse. Man works like 3 men, knows his way around cattle and horses like he was born in a saddle, but I have not heard his voice since the day he got here. Your father asked him something about his pay yesterday, and he just nodded and went back to work. Hannah found herself increasingly curious about the silent cowboy. She would watch him from a distance, noting the gentle way he handled the horses, how the most skittish mare in the stable would calm under his touch. There was something almost meditative about the way he moved, as though he had learned to communicate with the world through action rather than words. The Watson Ranch was one of the largest in Northern California, sprawling across thousands of acres of grassland and rolling hills. Hannah's mother had died when she was 15, and since then she had taken over running the household while her father managed the ranch operations. She had suitors, plenty of them, but none had interested her enough to accept their proposals. She valued her independence, her morning rides across the ranch land, her evenings reading by lamplight in the parlor. Winter came early that year. By mid-November, the temperatures had dropped and a bitter wind swept down from the mountains. The ranch hands spent long days repairing buildings, stockpiling feed, and preparing for the harsh months ahead. Nathaniel worked alongside them, still silent, still competent, and Hannah noticed that he had begun to anticipate problems before they arose. A water trough would be reinforced before it cracked in the cold. Extra firewood would appear on the porch before they ran low. He seemed to understand the rhythm of the ranch, as though he had been there for years rather than weeks. One morning in early December, Hannah's father fell ill with pneumonia. The doctor came from town and prescribed bed rest, leaving Hannah to manage both the house and oversee the ranch operations. She had helped her father with the accounts for years and knew every aspect of the business, but she had never been solely responsible before. The ranch hands respected her, but she could see the doubt in some of their eyes when she gave instructions, except Nathaniel. When she walked out to the barn that first morning to discuss the day's work, he was already there, and when she outlined what needed to be done, he simply nodded and began organizing the other men. She noticed that they followed his lead without question, and by the end of that first day, everything had been accomplished exactly as she had planned. This became their pattern. Each morning she would find him waiting, and she would tell him what needed to happen. He would nod, and it would be done. After a week, she realized she had begun to rely on him in a way that went beyond his role as a ranch hand. He seemed to understand not just what she said, but what she meant, anticipating needs and solving problems before she even articulated them. Her father recovered slowly, and by the time Christmas approached, he was well enough to sit up and take visitors but not yet strong enough to return to work. "That Nathaniel has been a blessing," he told Hannah one evening. "Pete says the men respect him, even though he never says a word. Says he leads by example, and that is the best kind of leadership there is." Christmas Day was cold and clear. Hannah prepared a feast for the ranch hands, as was tradition, and they all gathered in the bunkhouse to eat and celebrate. She noticed Nathaniel sitting in the corner, eating quietly while the other men laughed and told stories. When she brought out the apple pie she had made, his eyes met hers for just a moment, and she saw something there that made her heart skip, a warmth that his silence could not hide. The winter deepened. January brought snow, rare for Redding but not unheard of, and the ranch work became harder. Hannah found herself spending more time outside, checking on the animals, making sure the men had what they needed. Nathaniel was always there, often appearing at her side just when she needed help with something heavy or difficult. He never presumed, never overstepped, but his presence had become a comfort she had not expected. One particularly bitter afternoon in late January, she was struggling to get a barn door closed against the wind when he appeared beside her. Together they wrestled it shut, and when they turned away, breathless from the effort, she found herself standing very close to him. He looked down at her, and in his eyes she saw a question he would not ask, could not ask given his self-imposed silence. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything you have done this winter." He nodded, and then did something he had never done before. He smiled. It transformed his entire face, and Hannah felt something shift inside her chest, a recognition of something she had been trying to ignore for weeks. February arrived with a thaw, and with it came trouble. A group of men rode onto the ranch one morning, led by Marcus Blackthorne, a wealthy landowner from Sacramento who had been trying to buy the Watson Ranch for years. Hannah's father had refused every offer, and Blackthorne had grown increasingly aggressive in his tactics. Hannah was in the front yard when they arrived, hanging laundry despite the cold. Blackthorne dismounted and approached her with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Miss Watson, I heard your father has been ill. I wanted to check on his health and renew my offer for this property." "My father is recovering well, and the ranch is not for sale, Mr. Blackthorne. It never will be." Blackthorne's smile faded. "You should not be so quick to refuse, Miss Watson. A woman cannot run a ranch alone, and when your father passes, you will find yourself in a difficult position. I am not alone, and I am quite capable of managing our affairs." One of Blackthorne's men, a rough-looking character with a scar across his cheek, spat tobacco juice onto the ground. "Look at her, boss, playing at being a rancher. Probably cannot tell a bull from a steer." The other men laughed, and Hannah felt her face flush with anger. But before she could respond, she became aware of a presence behind her. Nathaniel had emerged from the barn, and though he stood several feet away, every line of his body was tense. Blackthorne noticed him too. "Who is this?" "Your guard dog, Miss Watson, one of our ranch hands," Hannah said coolly. "And you and your men are not welcome here. please leave." "Not until we have discussed business," Blackthorn said, his voice hardening. "Your father is a foolish old man, and you are an even more foolish woman if you think you can maintain this operation. You should be married, running a household, not pretending to understand ranch management." The scarred man laughed again. "Probably cannot even keep a house properly, the way she is out here doing men's work. No wonder nobody has married her. Who wants a woman who does not know her place?" The words hit Hannah like a slap. She had endured plenty of criticism over the years for her unconventional role on the ranch, but the casual cruelty of it still stung. She opened her mouth to deliver a sharp retort when a voice cut through the cold air, a voice she had never heard before, deep and clear and absolutely certain. "Not her." Everyone turned to stare at Nathaniel. He had taken several steps forward, and his eyes were fixed on the scarred man with an intensity that made the larger man step back. "You will not speak about her that way," Nathaniel continued, and his voice held a quiet authority that made Hannah's breath catch. "Miss Watson runs this ranch better than most men I have worked for, and she does it with more grace and intelligence than any of you could muster in a lifetime. You will apologize or you will leave. Choose now." The silence that followed was absolute. Blackthorn stared at Nathaniel with undisguised fury, while his men shifted uncomfortably. The scarred man looked like he wanted to respond, but something in Nathaniel's steady gaze made him think better of it. "This is not over," Blackthorn said finally, turning back to his horse. "You have made a powerful enemy today, whoever you are." "I have made no enemy," Nathaniel said quietly. "I have simply told you the truth. If that makes me your enemy, then you were never worth befriending." Blackthorn mounted his horse, his face twisted with rage. "You will regret this, both of you." Then he and his men rode off, leaving a cloud of dust and tension in their wake. Hannah stood frozen, staring at Nathaniel. He met her gaze, and she saw something vulnerable there, as though he had revealed more than he intended and was not sure how she would react. "You spoke," she said, and her voice came out as barely more than a whisper. "I did. Why?" "Why now, after all these months of silence?" Nathaniel looked away toward the horizon where Blackthorn and his men were disappearing. When he looked back, his expression was serious. "Because some things are worth breaking silence for. You are worth it." The words hung in the air between them, and Hannah felt her heart racing. Before she could respond, her father's voice called from the house. "Hannah, what is happening out there?" She turned, momentarily distracted, and when she looked back, Nathaniel had already started walking toward the barn. But something fundamental had shifted, and they both knew it. That evening, after she had reassured her father that everything was fine and explained what had happened with Blackthorn, Hannah sat in the parlor trying to read, but unable to focus on the words. She kept hearing Nathaniel's voice, kept seeing the way he had stood up for her without hesitation. No one had ever defended her quite like that before. There was a soft knock at the door. When she opened it, Nathaniel stood on the porch, his hat in his hands. "May I speak with you?" he asked. She nodded, stepping out onto the porch and closing the door behind her. The night was cold and clear, and stars filled the sky above them. "I owe you an explanation," he said, "about why I have not been speaking. You do not owe me anything. I do, though, especially now." He took a breath, and in the lamplight from the window she could see the conflict on his face. "I came from Montana. I had a ranch there, a small one with my brother. We worked it together for 5 years, built it up from nothing. Then last spring, there was a dispute with a neighboring rancher over water rights. Words were exchanged, then guns were drawn. My brother was killed." Hannah drew in a sharp breath, but Nathaniel continued, the words seeming to pour out of him now that he had started. "The other rancher claimed self-defense, and maybe it was. I do not know any more. All I know is that my brother died because of words, because of arguments that spiraled out of control. I sold the ranch, took what money there was, and decided I was done with talking. Words had taken everything from me, so I would not use them anymore. "Oh, Nathaniel," Hannah said softly. "I meant to keep that vow," he said. "I truly did. I rode from town to town, working where I could, never speaking more than was absolutely necessary. And then I came here and I met you." He looked at her directly now, and the emotion in his eyes made her throat tight. "I watched you every day, Hannah. I watched you work twice as hard as anyone else because you knew people were judging you. I watched you care for your father, manage the ranch, handle everything with such strength and grace. And I realized that I was falling in love with you, had been falling since that first week, and that silence was no longer a vow I could keep." Hannah's mind was reeling. "You love me." "I do. I know I have no right to say so. I am just a ranch hand with a tragic past and nothing to offer you. But when that man insulted you today, when he tried to diminish everything you are, I could not stay silent. Not about you. Never about you." The vulnerability in his voice broke something open inside Hannah. She stepped closer to him, close enough that she could see the slight trembling in his hands. "You think you have nothing to offer me," she said. "Nathaniel, you have been my partner this entire winter. You understood me when I could not even explain myself. You worked beside me, supported me, believed in me. Do you know how rare that is? Do you know how much that means?" "Hannah, I have been trying not to think about you," she interrupted. "Trying not to notice how my heart would lift every morning when I saw you, or how empty the day felt when you were working in the far pastures. I told myself it was foolish, that you were just a ranch hand passing through, that you had given no indication you felt anything for me." "I felt everything," he said quietly. "I still do." She reached out and took his hand, and the contact sent warmth flooding through her despite the cold night air. "Then perhaps you should stop being silent about it." He smiled, that same transformative smile she had seen before, and then he pulled her closer. "I love you, Hannah Watson. I love your strength, your intelligence, your kindness. I love the way you talk to the horses and the way you laugh at old Pete's terrible jokes. I love that you are exactly who you are, without apology or pretense." "I love you too," she said, and the words felt like a revelation. "I think I have loved you since you fixed that fence post your first day here, and I saw how much care you put into the smallest task." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumb brushing her cheek. "May I kiss you?" Instead of answering, she rose up on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, and then it deepened into something that felt like coming home. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Nathaniel rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do this properly," he said. "I want to court you, ask your father for permission, give you the life you deserve." "You are already giving me that," Hannah said. "But yes, you should talk to my father. He likes you, you know. He told me you were the best hand he ever hired." "That was before I kissed his daughter on the front porch." She laughed, and the sound seemed to delight him. They stood there for a long moment, reluctant to separate before Hannah finally stepped back. "Come to dinner tomorrow night," she said. "As a guest, not a ranch hand. Talk to my father then." He nodded, bringing her hand to his lips. "Until tomorrow, then." She watched him walk back to the bunkhouse, her heart so full she thought it might burst. When she went back inside, her father was standing in the hallway, a knowing look on his face. "I saw that," he said, but he was smiling. "About time, too. I was wondering how long it would take for you two to figure it out." "You knew." "Hannah, I am old, not blind. That boy has been looking at you like you hung the moon since November, and you have not been much better. I just wondered what it would take to break through his silence." He chuckled. "Should have known it would be someone insulting you." There is nothing that makes a man find his voice faster than seeing the woman he loves disrespected. The next evening, Nathaniel came to dinner wearing clothes Hannah had never seen before, clean and pressed, his hair neatly combed. He brought flowers he must have ridden into town to buy, and he shook her father's hand with quiet confidence. Dinner was a revelation. Away from the constraints of his self-imposed silence, Nathaniel was thoughtful and articulate. He told them more about his life in Montana, about growing up on a farm in Kansas before that, about his dreams and losses. He listened intently when Hannah spoke, asking questions that showed he genuinely cared about her thoughts and opinions. After the meal, while Hannah cleaned up in the kitchen, Nathaniel spoke with her father in the parlor. She could not hear the words, but she heard the low rumble of their voices, and when her father called her in, both men were smiling. "Nathaniel has asked my permission to court you," her father said. "I told him I would be honored to have him as a son-in-law someday, but that the decision is entirely yours." Hannah looked at Nathaniel, who stood with his hat in his hands, hope and nervousness warring on his face. "I already gave him my answer last night," she said, "but I will say it again with you as witness. Yes, Nathaniel Cross. Yes to courting, yes to whatever comes after." The next few weeks were among the happiest of Hannah's life. Nathaniel still worked on the ranch, but now he worked as a partner rather than just a hired hand. Her father, recognizing his skill and dedication, made him foreman and increased his wages. In the evenings, Nathaniel would come to the house, and they would sit together in the parlor, talking about everything and nothing, making plans for the future. But the shadow of Marcus Blackthorne had not disappeared. In early March, strange things began happening on the ranch. Fences were cut, allowing cattle to wander. A small fire was set in one of the hay barns, caught early enough to prevent major damage but clearly meant as a warning. The men found evidence of riders on the property at night, though they could never catch them. "It is Blackthorne," Hannah said one evening after they discovered another cut fence. "He's trying to harass us into selling." "Probably," Nathaniel agreed, "but we cannot prove it, and even if we could, the sheriff in Sacramento is in his pocket. So what do we do?" Nathaniel was quiet for a moment, thinking. "We make the ranch too strong to fail. We hire more men, increase security, show him that we will not be intimidated, and we prepare for whatever comes next." They followed through on that plan, hiring 3 more ranch hands and instituting a night watch. Nathaniel taught the men how to patrol effectively, how to spot signs of intrusion. Hannah worked on strengthening their business relationships, securing better prices for their cattle, diversifying their operations. By April, the harassment had decreased but not stopped entirely. Then, on a warm evening near the end of the month, a rider came to the ranch with a message for Hannah. Marcus Blackthorne was hosting a gathering in Redding, inviting all the local ranchers and business owners. Hannah was specifically requested to attend. "It is a trap," Nathaniel said immediately when she showed him the invitation. "Probably," Hannah agreed. "But if I do not go, he will use it against me. He will tell everyone I am too cowardly or too weak to face him in a social setting. Then I will go with you. You are not invited." "I do not care. I will not let you walk into that alone." They argued about it for an hour before finally reaching a compromise. Hannah would attend the gathering, but Nathaniel would come to town with her and wait nearby. If she needed him, she would find a way to send word. The gathering was held at the largest hotel in Redding, in a ballroom that had been decorated for the occasion. Hannah wore her best dress, a deep blue silk that had been her mother's, and she held her head high as she entered. Every eye in the room turned to her, and she could hear the whispers starting immediately. Blackthorne approached her almost instantly, his smile sharp. "Miss Watson, I am so pleased you could join us. I was not sure you would have the courage to attend." "I have never lacked courage, Mr. Blackthorne. No, just common sense." His voice was loud enough that others nearby turned to listen. "Tell me, how is your father? I heard he has been unwell. Such a shame. And who is managing the ranch in his absence? Surely not you." "The ranch is managed quite well, thank you. By that silent cowboy you have working for you. I heard he finally found his voice, and just in time to defend your honor." Blackthorne laughed. A cold sound. How romantic! A mute ranch hand and the spinster playing at being a rancher. It is like something out of a dime novel. The words were meant to sting, and they did, but Hannah kept her expression neutral. "If you invited me here simply to insult me, Mr. Blackthorne, I have better ways to spend my evening." "I invited you here to make you a final offer," Blackthorne said. "Sell me your ranch, Hannah. Sell it now while you still can, and I will give you a fair price. Refuse, and I will take it from you piece by piece. I have already begun, as you have no doubt noticed. The harassment will continue and escalate until you have no choice but to sell, probably for far less than I am offering now." Hannah looked around the room. Some of the other ranchers and business owners were watching with sympathy, but others looked away, unwilling to stand against Blackthorne's power. She realized then that this was not just about business for him. It was about control, about proving he could take whatever he wanted. "My answer is no," she said clearly. "It will always be no. That ranch belonged to my grandfather, then my father, and now it is mine. I will not sell it to you or anyone else, and I will not be intimidated by your threats." Blackthorne's face darkened. "You are a foolish woman, Hannah Watson." "Perhaps," she said, "but I am a woman who knows her own mind and will not be bullied by a man who thinks power gives him the right to take whatever he wants." She turned to leave, but Blackthorne grabbed her arm, his grip tight enough to hurt. "This is not over. Let go of me. Or what?" "You will run to your cowboy. Where is he, by the way? Did he not have the spine to come with you?" Before Hannah could respond, a familiar voice cut through the tension. "I am right here." Nathaniel stood in the doorway of the ballroom, and every eye turned to him. He was not dressed for a party, still wearing his work clothes, but he carried himself with such quiet authority that it did not matter. He crossed the room in long strides, and Blackthorne released Hannah's arm, stepping back. "I thought I made it clear you were not welcome," Blackthorne said. "You made many things clear," Nathaniel replied, "including the fact that you are a coward who threatens women and burns barns in the night. Everyone in this room knows what you have been doing to the Watson Ranch, Blackthorne. They are just too afraid of you to say it out loud." A murmur ran through the crowd. Nathaniel continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "But I am not afraid of you. Hannah Watson is worth 10 of you, and the ranch she runs is the most successful operation in this county, managed with more skill and integrity than you could ever muster. If you want to continue harassing her, you will have to go through me first." "And me," said a voice from the crowd. Old Pete Martinez stepped forward, his weathered face set in determined lines. "I have worked for the Watsons for 20 years, and I will not stand by while someone tries to destroy what they have built." "And me," said another voice. Then another. Within moments, more than a dozen people had stepped forward, ranchers and business owners who had stayed silent before but were now willing to stand with Hannah. Blackthorne looked around, his face pale with fury. "You are all fools." "Maybe," Nathaniel said. "But we are fools who know the difference between right and wrong. Leave Hannah and her ranch alone, Blackthorne. This is your only warning." For a moment, it seemed like Blackthorne might do something rash. His hand moved toward his hip, where Hannah knew he carried a pistol. But then he looked around at the faces watching him, at the people who had finally found the courage to oppose him, and he seemed to deflate. "This is not over," he said again, but the words lacked conviction. "Yes," Nathaniel said quietly, "it is." Blackthorn left the gathering, his remaining supporters trailing after him. The moment he was gone, the room erupted in conversation. People crowded around Hannah and Nathaniel, offering their support, apologizing for not speaking up sooner. Hannah felt Nathaniel's hand find hers, and she squeezed it gratefully. When they finally managed to extract themselves from the crowd and step outside into the cool night air, she turned to him. "You did not have to do that." "Yes, I did. I will always stand up for you, Hannah. Always." She kissed him there on the street, not caring who might see. When they pulled apart, she was smiling. "I think it is time we stopped pretending this is just a courtship." "What are you saying?" "I am saying marry me, Nathaniel Cross. Marry me and be my true partner in the ranch and in life." His smile was brighter than the stars above them. "I believe the man is supposed to ask that question. Then ask." He got down on one knee right there in the middle of the street, taking her hand. "Hannah Watson, will you marry me?" "Yes," she said, pulling him back to his feet. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They were married in June, in a simple ceremony at the ranch with all the hands and most of the town in attendance. Hannah's father walked her down an aisle formed by bales of hay, and when Nathaniel saw her in her mother's wedding dress, his eyes filled with tears. The preacher spoke about love and partnership, about the strength that comes from two people choosing to face the world together. When it came time for the vows, Nathaniel spoke in a clear, strong voice that carried across the assembled crowd. "I vow to love you, Hannah, in word and deed, through every season of our lives. I vow to be your partner, your protector, your friend. I vow to speak when silence would be easier, and to listen when words are hard. I vow to stand beside you always." Hannah's vows were equally heartfelt, and when they kissed as husband and wife, the cheer that went up could probably be heard in the next county. The reception was a joyful affair, with music and dancing and more food than seemed possible. As the sun set and lanterns were lit around the yard, Hannah and Nathaniel slipped away from the crowd to stand together by the corral, watching the horses. "Are you happy?" he asked, his arm around her waist. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she said. "Although I have been thinking about something." "What is that?" "We need a new barn. The old one is getting unsafe, and we will need more space if we are going to expand the operation like we have been planning." He laughed, pulling her closer. "Only you would be thinking about barn construction on your wedding night. It is practical. We should probably talk to the builders in town next week." "Next week," he agreed. "Tonight, I just want to dance with my wife." They returned to the party, and Nathaniel led her in a waltz that he performed with surprising grace. Later, when the guests had finally departed and the ranch had settled into peaceful darkness, they stood together on the porch of the main house, looking out over the land that was now truly theirs together. "You ever regret breaking your silence?" Hannah asked. "Never." That silence was born from grief and pain. Speaking again, speaking for you, that was born from love. And love is always worth the risk. She leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "I love you, Nathaniel Cross. And I love you, Hannah Cross." The name sent a thrill through her. She was still herself, still strong and independent, but now she was also part of something larger. A partnership built on mutual respect and genuine affection, the kind of love that made both people better. The following months brought their own challenges. Blackthorn made one more attempt to cause trouble, spreading rumors that the Watson Ranch was failing. But the support Hannah and Nathaniel had gained that night in the ballroom held firm. Other ranchers vouched for them. Business continued to grow. and eventually Blackthorn gave up and turned his attention elsewhere. Hannah's father, his health restored, stepped back from day-to-day operations but remained involved as an advisor. He delighted in watching Hannah and Nathaniel work together, often commenting that they anticipated each other's thoughts like people who had been partners for decades rather than months. By the following spring, Hannah discovered she was pregnant. She told Nathaniel one evening as they sat together in the parlor, the ranch accounts spread on the table between them. "I have some news," she said, setting down her pen. He looked up from the ledger he was reviewing. "Good news, I hope. The best. We are going to have a baby." The joy on his face was everything she could have hoped for. He stood so quickly he nearly knocked over his chair, coming around the table to pull her into his arms. "Hannah, are you certain? The doctor confirmed it this afternoon when I was in town. The baby should arrive in November." "November," he repeated, wonder in his voice. "A year after I first came to the ranch. It seems fitting, does it not?" He kissed her, tender and careful as though she were made of glass. "I am going to be a father, and you will be wonderful at it," she assured him. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Hannah refused to slow down her work on the ranch until her father and Nathaniel conspired to force her to take things easier. She grumbled about it, but secretly appreciated their concern. In late November, during a cold snap that reminded everyone of the previous winter, Hannah went into labor. It was a long and difficult birth, lasting nearly 20 hours, but when she finally held her son in her arms, every moment of pain was forgotten. "He is perfect," Nathaniel whispered, staring at the tiny face with an expression of absolute awe. "He needs a name," Hannah said. They had discussed names for months without reaching a decision. But now, looking at their son, Nathaniel said, "What about William, after your grandfather?" Hannah's eyes filled with tears. Her grandfather had built the ranch from nothing, had given her father the foundation that had allowed the family to thrive. "William Cross," she said. "It is perfect." The baby shifted in her arms, making a small sound, and they both laughed at the wonder of it. Nathaniel reached out to touch his son's tiny hand, and William's fingers closed around his father's finger with surprising strength. "He has your determination already," Nathaniel said. "And your stubbornness," Hannah replied with a smile. Being parents changed them in ways both expected and surprising. Nathaniel, who had spent months in silence, now filled the house with conversation, telling William stories about the ranch, about the horses, about anything and everything. Hannah, who had always been so focused on work, learned to pause and appreciate the small moments. The way William's face lit up when his father walked into a room, the sound of Nathaniel singing lullabies in the rocking chair late at night. The ranch continued to thrive. With Nathaniel as foreman and Hannah managing the business side, they expanded their operations, buying additional land and increasing their herd. Other ranchers began to seek their advice, and the Watson Ranch became known throughout Northern California as a model of successful, ethical operation. When William was 2 years old, Hannah became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and she gave birth to a daughter they named Grace, after Nathaniel's mother. Grace had her father's dark hair and her mother's determination, and from the moment she could walk, she followed William everywhere. "We are going to have our hands full with this one," Nathaniel said one afternoon, watching as Grace tried to climb onto a horse that was far too big for her. "As opposed to our son, who is so calm and obedient," Hannah replied, laughing as William attempted to rope a chicken. They had help, of course. Hannah's father doted on his grandchildren, and the ranch hands treated them like nephews and nieces. Old Pete Martinez taught William to ride, patient through every stumble and fall. The children grew up surrounded by love and laughter, learning the value of hard work and the importance of treating others with respect. The years passed in a blur of seasons, each bringing its own joys and challenges. There were hard winters and dry summers, good years and lean ones, but Hannah and Nathaniel faced it all together. Their partnership only deepened with time, built on a foundation of trust and communication that had been forged in those early months when Nathaniel's silence had paradoxically taught them both to truly listen. On their 10th anniversary, Nathaniel surprised Hannah with a trip to San Francisco, arranging for her father and the Hands to watch the children and the ranch. They spent 3 days in the city, eating in fancy restaurants, attending the theater, walking along the waterfront. It was a different world from the ranch, exciting and vibrant, but by the 3rd day they were both eager to return home. "I loved this," Hannah said as they prepared to leave, "but I miss the ranch. I miss the children." "I know exactly what you mean," Nathaniel replied. "This is wonderful, but it is not us. We belong on the land with our family." The ride back to Redding felt like returning to their true selves. When they crested the final hill and saw the ranch spread out below them, both felt a profound sense of homecoming. William and Grace ran out to meet them, full of stories about everything that had happened while they were gone. And that night, the whole family gathered around the dinner table, talking and laughing until the children could barely keep their eyes open. Later, after the children were in bed, Hannah and Nathaniel sat on the porch as they had done countless times before, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "You remember the night I told you I loved you?" Nathaniel asked. "Right here on this porch." "Every detail," Hannah said. "I remember thinking my heart might burst from how full it felt, mine too, and it has only gotten fuller since then." He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "You have given me everything, Hannah. A home, a family, a purpose. You brought me back to life when I thought I would spend the rest of my days in silence." "You did the same for me," she said. "I thought I was content with my life before you came, but I did not know what I was missing. You showed me what real partnership looks like, what it means to be truly seen and valued by another person." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and Hannah thought about how different silence felt now compared to those early months. Then, Nathaniel's silence had been a wall, a protection against further pain. Now their silences were companionable, the comfortable quiet of two people who did not need words to understand each other. "I have been thinking," Nathaniel said eventually, "about expanding the breeding program. That mare we bought last year has excellent bloodlines, and if we breed her to Midnight, I think we could develop a line of horses that would be in high demand." Hannah smiled. Even now, after all these years, she loved that they could shift seamlessly from deep emotion to practical ranch business. It was one of the things that made their partnership work so well. "I have been thinking about that too," she said. "But we would need to build new stables, and that would require significant investment." They talked through the logistics, making plans and solving problems, until the moon was high overhead. When they finally went to bed, Hannah felt the same sense of contentment she had felt every night since marrying Nathaniel. This was the life she had been meant to live, and he was the partner she had been meant to find. The children grew older. William developed his father's quiet competence and his mother's head for business. By the time he was 15, he was already discussing taking over the ranch someday, though both Hannah and Nathaniel encouraged him to see more of the world first. Grace inherited her mother's fierce independence and her father's way with horses. She could ride better than most of the ranch hands by the time she was 12, and she had her heart set on becoming a veterinarian, a profession that was just beginning to open up to women. Hannah's father passed away peacefully in his sleep when William was 16 and Grace 14. It was a loss that hit the whole family hard, but they took comfort in the fact that he had lived to see the ranch flourish, and his grandchildren grow into remarkable young people. They buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch, and Nathaniel carved a beautiful headstone that read, "Thomas Watson, father, grandfather, rancher, friend." With her father gone, Hannah found herself reflecting more on the passage of time and the importance of making the most of every day. She and Nathaniel made a point to take regular trips, just the two of them, exploring California and beyond. They visited Yosemite, sailed to Hawaii, took a train all the way to New York City. But they always came back to the ranch, to the life they had built together. When William was 22, he fell in love with the daughter of a neighboring rancher, a smart and spirited young woman named Sarah. Nathaniel and Hannah watched their son court her with all the earnestness and determination they remembered from their own early days together, and they welcomed Sarah into the family with open arms. The wedding was held at the ranch, just as Hannah and Nathaniel's had been, and as they watched William and Sarah exchange vows, Hannah felt Nathaniel squeeze her hand. "That was us once," he whispered. "It still is us," she whispered back. Grace, meanwhile, had gone off to study veterinary medicine in Sacramento, one of the first women admitted to the program. She wrote letters home full of excitement about her studies and frustration about the men who thought she did not belong there. Hannah and Nathaniel encouraged her to persist, knowing that their daughter had the strength and intelligence to succeed at anything she set her mind to. As Hannah and Nathaniel entered their 50s, they began to gradually step back from the day-to-day operations of the ranch, though they remained deeply involved in major decisions. William and Sarah took over most of the management, bringing their own ideas and energy to the work. The ranch continued to prosper, adapting to changing times while maintaining the core values that had always guided it. One evening, sitting on their familiar spot on the porch, Nathaniel turned to Hannah with a thoughtful expression. "Do you remember what you said to me once, about how some things are worth breaking silence for?" "I remember you saying that to me," Hannah corrected with a smile. "Did I? Well, whoever said it, it was true, and I have been thinking lately about all the things that are worth speaking about. Our children, our grandchildren, this ranch, this life we have built. But most of all, you will always be worth speaking about, worth speaking for, worth every word I could possibly say." Hannah felt tears prick her eyes. Even after all these years, Nathaniel could still move her with his words. "And you will always be worth listening to," she said. "Even when you were silent, I heard you. I heard everything you were saying through your actions, through the way you looked at me. But I am grateful every day that you found your voice again, that you chose to speak." "It was not really a choice," he said. "Not when it came to you. Loving you made silence impossible." They had 4 grandchildren now, with a 5th on the way. William and Sarah had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, while Grace had married a fellow veterinarian and had a son. The ranch house was often filled with the sound of children's laughter, and both Hannah and Nathaniel delighted in their roles as grandparents. On their 30th anniversary, the whole family gathered for a celebration. The ranch had never looked better, with new buildings and improved facilities, but still maintaining the character that Thomas Watson had established when he first claimed the land. William gave a toast, thanking his parents for building something that would last for generations, and Grace spoke about how their example of partnership and mutual respect had shaped her own marriage. Later, when the party had wound down and the grandchildren were asleep, Hannah and Nathaniel walked out to the hill where her father was buried. The moon was full, casting silver light across the ranch land, and they could see for miles. "We did it," Hannah said quietly. "We built something that will last." "You built it," Nathaniel said. "Long before I arrived, I just helped strengthen the foundation." "We built it together," Hannah insisted. "That is the truth of it. Neither of us could have done this alone, but together we made something extraordinary." Nathaniel pulled her close, and they stood there for a long time, looking out over the land they had devoted their lives to protecting and improving. Hannah thought about that November day 30 years ago when a silent cowboy had ridden onto the ranch. How she could never have imagined then where that day would lead. She thought about all the challenges they had faced, all the joys they had shared, all the ordinary and extraordinary moments that had woven together to create a life. "I would do it all again," she said. "Every moment, every challenge, every joy. I would choose you again in a heartbeat." "As would I," Nathaniel said. "You were the best thing that ever happened to me, Hannah Cross. You still are." They walked back to the house hand in hand, their steps in perfect sync after 3 decades of walking together. The ranch was quiet now, peaceful in the moonlight, and Hannah felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was what success looked like, not just a prosperous business, but a family built on love, a partnership that had weathered every storm, a legacy that would endure. As they prepared for bed that night, Hannah caught sight of their reflection in the mirror. They were older now, their hair streaked with gray, their faces marked by the years of sun and wind and laughter. But when Nathaniel came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder, she saw the same love in his eyes that had been there on their wedding day. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how lucky I am," she said. "About how a man who did not speak a word all winter became the person I talked to about everything. About how the best things in life often come from the most unexpected places." "I was just thinking the same thing," he said. "Except I was thinking about how a woman who did not need anyone became the only person I will ever need." They stood there for a moment, comfortable in each other's arms, before finally getting into bed. As Hannah drifted off to sleep, she heard Nathaniel whisper, "I love you, Hannah." "I love you too," she murmured back, and even half asleep, she smiled. The years continued to pass, gentle and full. Hannah and Nathaniel became great-grandparents, watching with joy as their family tree continued to branch and grow. They traveled less now, content to spend their days on the ranch, surrounded by the people and places they loved most. On a warm afternoon in late spring, when Hannah was 68 and Nathaniel 70, they took a ride together out to the far pasture where they had often gone during their courting days. The wildflowers were in bloom, carpeting the ground in brilliant colors, and the air was sweet with the scent of grass and earth. They dismounted and sat together on a large flat rock, watching the cattle graze in the distance. Nathaniel's hair was completely white now, and his movements were slower than they once had been, but his eyes still held the same warmth and intelligence that had captured Hannah's heart all those years ago. "You remember when you asked me why I spoke, after all those months of silence?" Nathaniel said, "Of course. You said some things were worth breaking silence for." "I have been thinking about that day a lot lately, about how one moment can change the entire trajectory of a life. If Blackthorn had not insulted you, if I had not spoken up, where would we be now?" "We would have found our way to each other eventually," Hannah said with certainty. "I truly believe that. We were meant to be together, Nathaniel. Silent or speaking, we would have recognized that." "I think you are right," he said, "but I am grateful it happened the way it did. I am grateful that defending you was what brought me back to the world of words and conversation. It set the tone for everything that came after, the understanding that love means standing up for each other, always." Hannah leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing. "We have had a good life." "The best life," he agreed, And it is not over yet. We still have time, Hannah. Time to watch our great-grandchildren grow. Time to see what William and Grace do with the ranch. Time to simply be together. That is all I need, she said. Time with you. They sat there until the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. Then they rode back to the ranch slowly, savoring the beauty of the evening and the comfortable silence that came from decades of shared experience. That night, after dinner with the family, Hannah and Nathaniel returned to their porch, to the spot where so many important conversations had taken place over the years. The ranch was settling into nighttime rhythms, lights going out in the bunkhouse, the last sounds of the day fading into peaceful quiet. "I have been thinking about something," Hannah said. "What is that?" "About how much you have given me. Not just love and partnership, but the courage to be fully myself. Before you, I was always defending my choices, justifying my role on the ranch. But you never questioned my capability or my right to do what I loved. You just supported me, believed in me. That was a gift I did not even know I needed." Nathaniel took her hand, his thumb tracing familiar patterns on her skin. "And you gave me back my voice, my ability to connect with the world. You showed me that words could heal as well as hurt, that communication was not something to be feared but embraced. We saved each other, Hannah. That is what love does." They sat together under the stars, and Hannah thought about all the nights they had spent just like this, talking and dreaming and planning. She thought about their children and grandchildren, about the ranch that would continue long after they were gone, about the legacy of love and partnership they were leaving behind. "Promise me something," she said. "Anything. Promise me that no matter what happens, no matter how many years we have left, we will face them together, the way we have faced everything else." "That is the easiest promise I will ever make," Nathaniel said. "Together, Hannah, always together." And so they continued, day by day, season by season, their love deepening with each passing year. They celebrated more anniversaries, welcomed more great-grandchildren, watched the ranch adapt and grow with changing times. There were sorrows, too, the loss of friends and beloved ranch hands, the aches and pains that came with aging, but they faced it all with the same partnership that had defined their entire marriage. On their 50th anniversary, the family threw a huge celebration. People came from all over California to honor the couple who had become something of a legend in ranching circles, not just for their successful operation, but for their example of enduring love and equal partnership. At the party, Hannah's granddaughter asked her the secret to such a long and happy marriage. Hannah looked across the room at Nathaniel, who was bouncing a great-grandchild on his knee and making the little girl giggle with delight. "The secret," she said, "is choosing each other every single day. It is not always easy and it is not always romantic, but it is always worth it. Find someone who respects you, who values your voice, who stands up for you even when it costs them something, and then be that person for them in return. That is what grandfather did for you." The granddaughter asked. "That is what we do for each other," Hannah corrected gently. "Love is not one person saving another. It is two people choosing to build a life together, to support each other, to grow together. Your grandfather and I have been doing that for 50 years, and I would not trade a single day of it." Later that night, when all the guests had finally left and the house was quiet, Hannah and Nathaniel made their way to bed, exhausted but happy. As they lay together in the darkness, Nathaniel said, 50 years. 50 years, Hannah echoed, and it still feels like not enough time. "We will take whatever time we are given," Nathaniel said, "and we will make the most of every moment." "We always have," Hannah replied. They fell asleep in each other's arms as they had done thousands of times before, two people who had found in each other not just love, but home. The ranch continued to flourish under William's management, with input and ideas from Grace when she visited. The breeding program Nathaniel had started decades ago had become renowned throughout the state, and the Watson name was synonymous with quality and integrity. But for Hannah and Nathaniel, the greatest success was not measured in profit or acreage, but in the family they had created and the love they had sustained. As they entered their 70s, they slowed down even more, but they never stopped being interested in the ranch and the family. They were consulted on major decisions, their experience and wisdom valued by the younger generations. And every evening, weather permitting, they still sat on their porch, watching the sun set over the land they loved. One particularly beautiful evening in late summer, as the sky turned brilliant shades of purple and orange, Nathaniel turned to Hannah and said, "I need to tell you something." The seriousness in his tone made Hannah's heart skip. "What is it?" "I am not afraid of dying," he said quietly. "I have lived a full life, richer than I ever dreamed possible, but I am afraid of leaving you alone." Hannah felt tears well up in her eyes. They rarely talked about such things, preferring to focus on the present, but she knew what he meant. "And I am afraid of the same thing," she admitted. "Of being here without you, of facing days that you are not part of." "So we make another promise," Nathaniel said. "Whoever goes first, the other one keeps living, really living, not just existing. We have built something too beautiful to let it fade because one of us is gone." "That is a hard promise to make, I know, but it is important. Promise me, Hannah. Promise me you will keep living, keep loving, keep being the incredible woman you have always been. Only if you promise the same." "I promise." They held each other as the last light faded from the sky, and Hannah felt the weight of that promise settle into her heart. It was frightening to think about a future without Nathaniel, but it was also comforting to know that they had thought about it, planned for it, promised to honor each other's memory by continuing to embrace life. As it turned out, they had more years together than they feared. They made it to their 60th anniversary, surrounded by 4 generations of family, and the celebration was even bigger than the 50th. By then, the Watson Ranch had expanded to include sustainable farming practices and ecotourism, adapting to the changing world while maintaining its essential character. Hannah and Nathaniel were both in their 80s now, their bodies frail but their minds still sharp and their love still strong. They needed help with many daily tasks, but they were well cared for by family and by the ranch hands who had become like family over the decades. On a cool evening in October, they sat together on the porch wrapped in blankets, watching their great-great-grandchildren play in the yard. The newest addition to the family, a baby girl named Hannah after her great-great-grandmother, slept peacefully in her mother's arms. 6 generations, Nathaniel said softly. "From your grandfather to that little one, that is quite a legacy." "Our legacy," Hannah corrected. "Yours and mine together." "I suppose it is," he agreed. "Though I still think you deserve most of the credit. You were the one who refused to give up when Blackthorn tried to take everything. You were the one who had the vision and courage to build this into what it is today. And you were the one who stood beside me through all of it," Hannah said. "Who spoke up when I needed defending, who worked tirelessly to make our dreams reality, who loved me unconditionally for more than 60 years. Do not diminish your role in this, Nathaniel Cross. You are as much a part of this legacy as I am." He smiled, and even now, weakened by age, his smile still had the power to make her heart flutter. "We make a good team. The best team," she agreed. As the sun set, and the children were called inside for dinner, Hannah and Nathaniel remained on the porch a little longer, reluctant to end such a perfect day. They watched the stars emerge one by one, and Hannah thought about all the nights they had done exactly this, marking the passage of time with their quiet companionship. "I love you," Nathaniel said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I love you too," Hannah replied, and the words held the weight of 60 years of shared life, of joy and sorrow, of challenges overcome and dreams achieved. That night they went to bed early, tired from the day's activities but content. They fell asleep holding hands as they always did, and when morning came, Nathaniel did not wake up. He had passed peacefully in his sleep, his face serene, his hand still clasped in Hannah's. The grief was overwhelming. Despite all their talk about preparing for this moment, nothing could have truly prepared Hannah for the reality of losing her partner of more than 60 years. The ranch fell into mourning, and people came from all over to pay their respects to a man who had been respected and loved by everyone who knew him. They buried Nathaniel next to Hannah's father on the hill overlooking the ranch. The headstone reads simply, "Nathaniel Cross, beloved husband, father, grandfather, friend, he found his voice for love." In the weeks after the funeral, Hannah struggled. The house felt empty without Nathaniel's presence, and she found herself turning to speak to him a dozen times a day, only to remember that he was gone. But then she would remember the promise they had made to each other, the vow to keep living, and she would find the strength to get through another day. William and Grace wanted her to move in with one of them, but Hannah refused. This was her home, the place where she and Nathaniel had built their life, and she was not ready to leave it. Instead, they arranged for someone to check on her daily, and the family made sure she was never alone for too long. Slowly, painfully, Hannah learned to live with her grief. She found comfort in her family, in watching the ranch continue to thrive, in knowing that the legacy she and Nathaniel had built would endure long after they were both gone. She went through Nathaniel's things, sharing his possessions with their children and grandchildren, telling stories about the man he had been and the life they had shared. One evening, about 6 months after Nathaniel's death, Hannah sat on the porch alone, watching the sunset. She had her memories, bittersweet and beautiful, and she had the ranch still vital and strong. And she had the promise she had made to Nathaniel, the vow to keep living fully. "I am trying," she said aloud, speaking to the empty air as though Nathaniel could hear her. "It is hard without you, but I am trying to honor our life by continuing to live mine." A breeze rustled through the trees, and for just a moment, Hannah could almost feel Nathaniel's presence beside her, could almost hear his voice saying that he was proud of her, that he loved her, that he would wait for her however long it took. Hannah lived for 3 more years after Nathaniel's death. They were not easy years, but they were not empty ones either. She remained involved in the ranch as much as her health allowed, offering advice and wisdom to William and Grace. She delighted in her great-great-grandchildren, telling them stories about their great-great-grandfather and the love story that had built the foundation of their family. She wrote extensively during those years, filling journal after journal with memories and reflections. She wanted her descendants to know the truth of her life with Nathaniel, not just the legend that had grown up around them, but the real, messy, beautiful truth of 2 imperfect people who had chosen each other and built something lasting. On a warm afternoon in May, Hannah asked to be taken up to the hill where Nathaniel was buried. Her great-grandson helped her make the journey, and she sat there for a long time, one hand resting on the headstone, talking to Nathaniel as though he could hear her. "I kept my promise," she said. "I kept living, kept loving, kept being part of this family and this ranch. But I am tired now, my love. I am ready to rest." That night, surrounded by her family, Hannah Cross passed away peacefully in her sleep, just as Nathaniel had done. She was 87 years old and she had lived a full, rich, remarkable life. They buried her next to Nathaniel, and the headstone they placed there read, Hannah Cross, beloved wife, mother, rancher, pioneer. She built a legacy of love. The ranch continued for generations after that, passed down through William's line, and supported by Grace's descendants. The story of Hannah and Nathaniel became family legend, told and retold to each new generation as an example of what true love and partnership could accomplish. And every evening, when the sun set over the Watson Ranch, it seemed to paint the sky in colors that were just a little more beautiful than anywhere else, as though the land itself remembered the love story that had unfolded there. The silent cowboy who had found his voice and the strong woman who had given him reason to speak. Their great-great-great-grandchildren still live on the ranch today, still raising cattle and horses, still maintaining the values of integrity and hard work that Hannah and Nathaniel established so long ago. And when they sit on the porch in the evening, watching the stars emerge, they sometimes feel the presence of those who came before, the generations of love and partnership that built the foundation they stand on. The story of the cowboy who never spoke a word all winter, who finally broke his silence to defend the woman he loved, became more than just family history. It became a testament to the power of love to transform us, to the importance of standing up for what matters, to the beauty of two people choosing to build a life together against all odds. And in the end, that is what endures. Not the wealth they accumulated or the land they owned, but the love they shared and the family they created. A legacy that will continue as long as there are people who remember that sometimes the most profound things are said not with words, but with actions. And that true love is found not in grand gestures but in the daily choice to honor, respect, and cherish the person you have chosen to walk beside through all the seasons of life.